Hi, my name is Dean Mead, and I am a partner and government and public sector subline leader with Carr, and Ingram, or CRI. This is the last of 5 brief videos about deferred inflows of resources and deferred outflows of resources. We've talked so far about what deferrals are, where they came from, and what they do, particularly with respect to pensions and other post-employment benefits, or OPEB. Let's turn our attention now to what the information about deferrals means and what it tells us about a government's financial health. We're going to focus on 5 of the things that deferrals information is valuable for, though there are many other uses beyond these. Let's begin with how deferrals help to avoid misinterpreting financial statement items as assets or liabilities. What you see here are 2 versions of a part of a governmental fund's balance sheet. On top is the version before GASB required the reporting of deferrals, and the bottom is the same information, but with the deferrals requirements applied. This item here is a prime example of something that used to be reported as a liability that actually was a deferred inflow of resources or a combination of liabilities and deferred inflows. Compare the amounts in this row for the deferred revenue liability with the line below for advances on grants. The $1.4 million advances on grants liability is the only thing contained in the deferred revenue amounts that actually was a liability. The rest of the amounts were really deferred inflows. Take a look at the liability amount with and without the deferred inflows included. The actual liabilities for the governmental funds in total were only half of what was being called a liability, 49%. Differences of that magnitude can greatly affect our views on the financial health of a government. When deferrals were included among the assets, it gave the impression that the government had more resources at its disposal than it actually did. On the flip side, when deferrals were included among the liabilities, it gave the impression that the government needed more resources to pay off its IOUs than it actually did. Any financial ratio calculated using assets or liabilities might have given an inaccurate take on the government. For example, a simple leverage ratio is liabilities divided by assets. A leverage ratio indicates the extent to which a government's assets have been acquired through borrowing, such as an account payable, taking out a loan, or issuing municipal bonds. Generally, the lower the leverage ratio, the healthier the government is, all other factors being equal. To put it in personal finance terms, someone whose outstanding home mortgage balance is equal to 40% of the value of their home is financially healthier than someone with an identical home whose mortgage equals 80% of the value of the home. Using the information from the pre-deferrals governmental funds balance sheet we just examined, the government looks highly leveraged. It appears that the amounts it owes equal 82% of the value of its assets. The government's equity in its assets, so to speak, is just 18%. Calculate the same ratio using the post-deferrals information, however, and you can see that the government actually is much less leveraged than it appeared. Its liabilities equal just 37% of the value of its assets, or its equity in the assets is 63%. If one were to track a government's deferrals related to unavailable revenue over time, it might provide insights into the government's ability to collect on amounts it's owed. For instance, this slide contains information over an 8-year period for grants revenue and the deferred inflow for unavailable grants revenue. Recall that unavailable revenue is the amount owed to the government that was not collected during the year or shortly thereafter. Dividing the deferred inflow by total grant revenue for the year is an indication of the size of the deferral, a ratio that can be examined over time. If the percentage declines over time, it suggests the government is collecting a greater percentage of that particular revenue during the year, which is a positive development. By contrast, if the percentage increases over time, it suggests that the government is collecting less of that particular revenue during the year, which is a negative development. A couple of things are notable right away from this information. In the first 5 years, the unavailable grant revenue is as large as half of the total grant revenue for the year. That seems to suggest that it takes a relatively long time for this government to collect the grant money it is owed. That's not necessarily the government's fault. The federal government, for instance, is notoriously slow to make payments on grants. On a positive note, there was an improvement in 2019 when the ratio dropped from 50% to under 43%. However, the ratio rises again in each of the next 3 years. Then, in 2023, there's no unavailable grant revenue at all. What happened? Was the government suddenly able to collect all of its outstanding grant revenue? The amount of grant revenue in 2023 is about $4.6 million higher than in 2022, but more than $38 million of unavailable revenue has vanished. This is the kind of red flag the financial ratios may raise, pointing you towards something that needs further investigation.